Well, thanks for tuning into the Market Wrap. I'm Niraj. Shah, with me is Nickey, Mirchandani, and it's turned out to be well. You have to argue that if you would have ended in the green, then you would have been happy simply because the world markets were looking iffy since the start of the trading day today. So here's what the indices have done: about a quarter of a percent in the red, nothing too dramatic. And nothing was expected. Frankly, if you look at the list of gainers, you will see that they are spread all across, right? I mean, from an NTPC to a Airtel to Tata Motors to Bajaj Finance, a clutter of names just moving all around, and that's what made up the trade. There are no clear, definitive winners or losers. The problem is that some of the usual suspects are starting to correct and stay low. So you had Infosys, for example, correct, and that's symptomatic of what's happening to IT. Reliance has looked slightly wobbly the last few days, and that has also looked wobbly today too. So that is essentially the problem. Frankly, if I can just quickly enumerate the trade takeaways today before we move on to what individual stocks did, I think one, that the biggest gainer of the last few weeks and months, CNX Pharma, is down over 8% from October highs. It's not a small 1-2% correction. Corrected 8 whole percent from those levels. So keep that in mind. Hero MotoCorp was down today, but I think auto and auto components largely showed some traction. And if it was cement, steel, and real estate which gained yesterday and day before, today power and capital goods stocks took part in the rally. Those indices were doing okay, and therefore I think there is a bit of a turn taking from each of these indices. Nickey, what stood out in terms of the large cap activity today? Because there was, I mean, it was quiet, yes, but there were a bunch of stocks which were active.
Sure. Good afternoon, Niraj. I'm going to start off with Bajaj Finance because the numbers were rather encouraging, which you saw the stock was rather top gainer in the Nifty 50 index. Also, we have in our list Bharti Airtel, which did well today. CRSA early in the morning came out with a report and said that at this point of time, the tariff hikes are delayed, but they're not inevitable. They're going to happen at some point of time. They've already factored in 10 to 15% kind of annual hike for three telecoms starting Q4 FY21 with higher AGR and spectrum burden, because of which you saw a sharp uptick coming in on Bharti Airtel. And also what my eye was Vedanta, of course, fourth consecutive session of gain coming in for Vedanta. Early part, or rather yesterday and late in the night at 10 o'clock around, there was a announcement which came in that the board is going to be meeting in on October 24th to consider and approve the first ever interim dividend for this financial year. Now, remember, in the last quarter there was no pass through for the dividend which came through, because of which the street was kind of a little iffy. If this time around also the benefits of Hindustan Zinc declaring the huge dividend will be passed through to Vedanta shareholders, but Street is working with an estimate of rupees 15 for this quarter, and the dividend, if for the previous quarter is also given in this one, then we can work with an estimate around 2025. So that's going to be a significant move coming in for Vedanta minority shareholders, especially after delisting, and also got to do with the fact that there were many short positions which are standing on the counter. But then I'm going to quickly come back to you, Niraj, and ask you about how the mid-cap space is shaped up for the day.
I mean, I'll the individual names I'm sure you'll bring up, but if you just pull up that MOE chart, and it's very pertinent to look at the market breadth yet again today, third day on a trot, that we've had positive breadth on the Nifty 500, and that tells you something. Again, if you look at the gainers versus losers, you will see the top 15 names had gains of over 5%, whereas only one name lost over 5%, and that's SBI Cards. Now, with reason, impairments so high, plus the NPA levels looking very high, 7.5% down for that one in the session today. Not surprising. It'll be interesting to hear from the management as to what led to such high impairments, because that is the big shocker really from an SBI Cards perspective. That aside, Hudson Agro had some corrective moves today, 773, that one down 3.5. And from what moved up, JK Tyre, results reaction, Cochin Shipyard and some of the others because of this government announcement. And somewhere down the line, we had Polyplex move up again. I remember those companies are in a bit of a sweet spot because of all the changes that are happening to packaging. So those are a few names that stood out. Nickey, I don't know what stood out for you though.
Yeah, a couple of counters. I'm going to be starting off with Aurobindo Pharma because that's a 6.5% hit during the day of trade. Later, the stock did recover, but still ended the day with losses around 3.5%. There was a warning letter coming in for one of the facility because of which you saw some amount of profit booking coming in on this counter. But then Investec in its in its first cut note said that the Dayton facility, which has got the warning letter, the existing business would not get impacted. The new A&Ds, of course, would get stalled from the facility. But at this point of time, Aurobindo has just 9 A&D approvals pending from the side. It generates around 50 to 60 million dollar sales. So the sales are not going to be impacted. It's just the new E&Ds of all coming in from this facility shall be delayed if the issue is not being taken care of. But we also what we have in our list is two other counters there. First is going to be Chennai Petroleum, where the share price has rallied more than 15% in today's trade. Sorry, if the company has reported a net profit as compared to a net loss that we've seen in the corresponding quarter. And what also stood out on the Nifty 500 index was Mangalore Refinery, where the board is going to be meeting in on October 29th to consider the fundraising plans. But then, Niraj, I think it's going to be, Bajaj Auto has come out with numbers, and with this, the entire auto pack was, of course, in focus. Anything that you'd like to watch out for the week?
No, I mean, I think the reaction from Hero MotoCorp today also was interesting. And the fact that there have been enough and more FADA dealers or the dealers associations which are talking about how the auto sales for the OEMs are good. It just remains to be seen if dealers lap up the inventory and if customers eventually go out and buy. So I think from that perspective, that is one key point to monitor. And then, of course, consumption remains in focus, right? With Nestle coming out tomorrow, consumption, pseudo consumption, all of them firmly in focus. But Nickey, around the corner, we'll see a lot of cars with garlands. So I think that should keep the sentiments of the auto stocks upbeat. But just before we wrap up, what about the global markets?
Yeah, European market is down and out in red at this point of time, and even the US stock futures are indicating a negative start to the Wall Street. So we're not really looking at a pretty picture coming in for the on the global front at least, but hopefully the sentiment would be buoyed in Indian markets. You have slew of earnings which will be in focus, and the Vedanta, of course, the board meeting, which again will be very important to watch out for. But with this, it's a wrap on this segment. Thank you so much for watching.